I'm Victoria, and I am speaking to fellow preachers of the Revised Common Lectionary. At this point, you have probably looked at the sermon text for next week and realized that we have left the, raw and quick-moving Jesus of the Gospel of Mark and have suddenly transitioned into the mysterious and kind of weird Johannine Jesus as we jump right into chapter 6 for the Gospel reading. That's right. We are about to encounter Jesus as the bread of life for 5 straight weeks. You know that feeling you get halfway through those weeks? That one that overcomes you when you realize that you've already preached 2 sermons on the metaphor of bread and you still have 3 weeks to go? Maybe you're staring at that little blinking cursor on the blank page that's supposed to be full of your sermon ideas, and you think to yourself, man, I could really use a snack. So I created this video in hopes of making your sermon prep more interesting, or at least more tasty. I'm going to share with you a couple of my thoughts on the texts, while also sharing with you a recipe for tasty, tasty bread. It's so good. Come here. Good boy. Come on, good boy. First text, the feeding of the 5,000. First recipe, barley loaves.
The ingredients you need are going to be regular white flour, whole wheat flour, and barley flour. You are also going to need salt, yeast, and warm water. You're going to want to start your dough in the mid-afternoon of the day before you need it, at least, because it needs about 5 hours of sitting out at room temperature in order to develop flavor, and then it needs to sit in your refrigerator overnight, or for 12 to 14 hours. So I am starting this bread around 4 o'clock. You should probably start it closer to 1 if you want a more convenient timeline. So step 1, you're going to want a really big bowl, or in my case, a stock pot. You're going to mix the flours in here by hand. Next, you're going to pour in the warm water. So you're going to cover this and let it rest for 20 minutes to a half hour. During this time, consider going over the readings for the week. Elisha feeds 100 prophets with 20 barley loaves. Foreshadowing. You open your hand, satisfying the desire of every living thing. Oh, it's nice. Know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. It could be the love of Christ or the love from Christ. The Greek is ambiguous. Do you ever wonder who this kid was? Like, did the disciples actually know him, or did they just steal his lunch money? Okay. Now that we have a bread dough that looks something like that, we're going to add the salt and the yeast. You can just sprinkle both right on top as evenly as possible. That was not a good example. And then instead of needing to combine the ingredients, especially since the water's already been added and we're putting in dry ingredients on top of that, you can fold, which I've already started doing, but you can see. You work your hand under the dough, pull it up, and over until you've gone all the way around. This is hard to do with one hand. And then you just pinch the dough. And you do it again. And you will do that many times until they're all combined. Doesn't take that long, actually, just a few minutes. Oh, I always forget to, but you can also wet your hand so that the dough doesn't stick to it like you're some kind of horrible dough monster while you do this. Okay. When you're done, you're gonna let the dough rest for 5 hours so that it actually starts to ferment a little, and then the alcohol and the gases that are produced when the yeast eats the sugars is going to help develop your bread. So that's what's gonna happen. I'll show you what it looks like now. Ta-da! In the first couple of hours, you're gonna want to fold it, pulling up about a quarter of the dough and folding it over the top, all the way around. You're gonna wanna do that 3 to 4 times, and it's easiest to do it in the first couple of hours that it starts to rise. But otherwise, you're just gonna let it sit by itself and think about what it's done. Cover it. You'll be back 4 to 5 hours. It can sit out at room temperature. If you did accidentally become a dough monster while kneading, I highly recommend having on hand a large dog who likes bread. Barnaby's a big fan and very efficient. It's 5 hours later. Check out what the dough has done here. Beautiful. I'm going to take it out of the stock pot and onto a floured surface. I already have prepared 2 bowls where the mixture is going to sit in the refrigerator overnight and hang out. My bowls are a little on the small side. If you've got bigger bowls, by all means use those. And I've put towels in them and sprinkled the towels with flour. So those are ready to go. Flour your hands, and if you feel like it, you can add a little flour around the edge of the tub in the hope that that might help ease it out a bit. But generally, you're just gonna go for it. It's a lot of dough. I'm putting a little bit of flour right down the middle because what we're doing here is dividing the dough in half. Spatula, and just come right down the middle. Dough is in 2 pieces. My dough is actually on the wet side because I accidentally added too much water and had to compensate. Hopefully yours was going to be a little easier to handle. Keep your hands floured as you work with the dough. You're going to do the same folding thing that you did when the dough was in the stock pot. So just taking and folding toward the center. When you sort of have things arranged and all tucked up into the center, flip the dough over and move it onto a surface that's clean of flour, and you can actually use the tension of the dough on the non-floured surface to help pull it into a ball. So you end up with something that looks like this. Nice and smooth and with a nice tension in it. All the seams from the folding the dough over are on this side, and I'm going to put it seam side down inside its little basket for the night. So now I'm just putting each of these inside a plastic bag to help them not dry out. And they are going into the refrigerator for the night. Now if you started the dough at 1 o'clock, it's now about 6 o'clock when you're doing this step. You're going to stick them in the fridge. They'll be ready at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and they're going to be ready to bake. So you're going to have bread by 9 o'clock.
Hello and welcome to the next day. Barnaby says hi too. So the dough has been in the refrigerator for about 14 hours at this point, and I am going to take it out of the bag. Oh. bowl really is too small for it, but we'll be fine. I'm going to unwrap it, take it out, and turn it onto a lightly floured surface. Oh, thank you, Betty. Take a look at this. Pleasantly bowl-shaped. So I'm going to take the Dutch oven out of the oven where it is currently sitting. That's how I bake these. Baking them inside a Dutch oven helps create a steam that prevents the crust from forming before the dough has fully risen. And that's a good thing. So I bake it for about a half hour with the lid on the Dutch oven inside a hot 450-degree oven, and then I take the lid off and let it go for another 20 minutes. So let's do that, being very, very careful not to touch the extremely hot surfaces. And that's all for half an hour. The bread's been in for about 20 minutes so far, and it already smells so good. So about 10 more minutes and I'll take the lid off. But in the meantime, it's a great time to start talking about those texts. It's a great time to start talking about those texts. Texts. It's a hard word. All 4 of the readings talk about God's miraculous abundance. 3 of them use the image of food to symbolize that abundance, and 2 of those 3 use the specific image of bread. And that's a fascinating choice because as a symbol, bread actually sits at the intersection between abundance and scarcity. Take the way we grow grain. Since the 1970s, global grain production has tripled, but in that same period of time, a third of the world's farmland has become unfarmable, thanks to intensive modern agriculture. And modern methods don't just bankrupt soil. The costly chemicals that make that farming possible, that go into the fertilizers and pesticides and machine fuels, those can bankrupt farmers too. Bread anchors attention between abundance and scarcity that you can see playing out in innumerable ways in the communities that you serve. Run a couple of Google searches and see if you can find out in your communities where the food deserts are, how many families are food insecure, and how many kids in your school district are on a free or reduced price lunch program. St. Gregory of Nyssa wrote a sermon on the Lord's Prayer in the early centuries of the church, and when it came to the petition, "Give us today our daily bread," he wrote, "You are the master of your prayer. If abundance does not come from another's property and is not the result of another's tears, if no one is hungry or distressed because you are fully satisfied. For the bread of God is above all the fruit of justice." Is the bread we offer, the one that comes up to the communion table, is that the fruit of justice? Who baked it? Who grew the grain? And who in the community isn't getting that bread? And as you ask those very important questions, just also remember to hold on to the sign and promise of God's abundance that Jesus makes present in the feeding of the 5,000 and makes present every time we gather around the table and eat his body and drink his blood. Now the bread should be ready. Yay! If you have a cooling rack, you can put the bread out on that. It's ready to be taken out right away. I have a towel. It won't stick to the Dutch oven. Thank you for that, Harvey. Got a little overzealous on the flour. This is what it looks like. I didn't put it in so gracefully, which is why it's got that lip. It actually kind of kept the pattern from the towel. It looks pretty cool. So put it up on its side to cool if you're using a towel. If you're using a cooling rack, you don't have a problem. And make sure that you listen for the crackling sound as the crust cools, because I swear that's like the best part. After I took this loaf out, I put the Dutch oven back in the oven for a reheat for about 5 minutes before taking out the second loaf and putting that in. If you have two Dutch ovens, just do them at the same time. If you don't have a Dutch oven at all, you can probably accomplish about the same thing by putting your loaf on a baking stone or other cookware that can withstand an oven temperature of 450 degrees. And also put in a cast iron frying pan and a couple of cubes of, not just a couple, like half a cup of the cubes, a bunch of ice. Just put in ice, and that'll create the steam that accomplishes the same thing that the Dutch oven does. So that's it for today. I am going to have a nice tuna fish sandwich on my barley loaf. I thought it would be pretty apropos. Leave a comment below if you have anything to add to the observations on the text. I'd love to continue the conversation. If I have the time, I'll keep posting videos for the next 4 weeks of the Bread of Life series. Would love to hear what you think of this one. Thanks for bearing with me while I figure out this video editing stuff, and let me know how it goes for you. Blessings this Sunday. May you preach God's word, and may the people hear it. Amen.